a high-profile music executive, a secret criminal empire, a federal takedown. Operation Drawdown has rocked Los Angeles, exposing a web of alleged gang activity, violence, and fraud. At the center of it all, Eugene "Big U" Henley Jr., a man who built his reputation as a respected figure in the hip-hop industry, mentoring some of the biggest names in rap. But now, federal authorities say he wasn't just guiding artists, he was allegedly running a criminal organization in plain sight. Authorities say Henley and members of the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips engaged in extortion, fraud, human trafficking, and even murder, all under the cover of legitimate businesses and community outreach. The allegations are explosive, shaking both the music industry and the city of Los Angeles. But how did a man known for his philanthropic work and mentorship find himself at the center of a massive federal indictment? This is the Silent Casebook, and today we're breaking down Operation Drawdown, how the feds took down one of LA's most powerful underworld figures, and what it means for the future of gang investigations in America. Before the federal indictments, before the criminal allegations, Eugene "Big U" Henley was a name respected in both the streets and the music industry. Depending on who you ask, he was either a mentor, a businessman, or a feared figure in Los Angeles gang culture. Born and raised in Los Angeles, Henley came up in the tough streets of South Central, a breeding ground for some of the most notorious gangs in America. He became a high-ranking member of the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, one of the largest and most feared street gangs in LA. In the late 1980s and early 90s, gang violence in LA was at its peak. The streets were a battlefield, and the Rolling 60s were at the center of it all. Henley was deeply entrenched in the life, but prison would change his path. After serving time for armed robbery, Henley emerged in the early 2000s with a new approach. He wasn't just another gangster, he was a man with connections, influence, and a plan to use his reputation to shape the future of LA's hip-hop scene. Rebranding himself as a community leader, Henley founded Developing Options, a non-profit dedicated to helping at-risk youth avoid the gang life. He became a mentor to rising artists, including Nipsey Hussle, and worked with major record labels and entertainment figures. For years, Big U positioned himself as a bridge between the streets and the music industry, a man who understood both worlds, a man who claimed to be helping the community rise above gang culture. But now, federal prosecutors say that wasn't the full story. They claim that behind the scenes, Henley was running a criminal empire, using his influence to facilitate extortion, fraud, and even murder. So what exactly did the feds uncover, and how did a man who once spoke about saving lives become the target of a federal takedown? Let's break down the allegations. In March 2025, federal authorities unveiled a sweeping indictment against Eugene "Big U" Henley Jr. and his associates, alleging a complex web of criminal activities that spanned over a decade. Let's delve into the specific charges outlined in this comprehensive legal document. At the core of this indictment is the charge under the RICO Act, a powerful tool used by law enforcement to take down entire criminal organizations. RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, and it allows for the prosecution of leaders and individuals involved in organized crime, even if they didn't directly commit every crime. Instead, it focuses on how the accused individuals contribute or enable the criminal enterprise. The RICO Act is essential in dismantling organized crime syndicates by focusing not just on the specific illegal acts, but on the broader pattern of criminal behavior over time. In this case, the charge against Eugene "Big U" Henley is tied to his role as the leader of an enterprise that allegedly engaged in numerous illegal activities, including murder, extortion, human trafficking, and drug trafficking. Under the RICO statute, Henley is accused of orchestrating these crimes through direct involvement or by influencing his associates, while running his operations under the cover of his legitimate business, Unique Music, and non-profit, Developing Options. RICO charges are often reserved for individuals who exert control over an ongoing criminal organization, making this charge particularly significant for Henley's case. What makes the RICO charge so powerful is that it allows prosecutors to target the head of a criminal organization. For a traditional criminal charge, authorities would have to tie the individual directly to each criminal act, but under RICO, Henley doesn't need to have personally carried out every crime. His role in directing, funding, or supporting these illegal activities is enough to warrant federal charges. This enables prosecutors to focus on dismantling the entire structure of a criminal enterprise, which, in Henley's case, allegedly spanned multiple areas of illicit business, ranging from murder to fraud to illegal gambling. The inclusion of the RICO Act in Henley's indictment underscores the scale and coordination of the alleged criminal operations. RICO charges are often seen as a tool to take down mafia-like structures, and by applying it to Henley's enterprise, the federal authorities are sending a message that these types of organized networks will be prosecuted at the highest levels. If convicted, Henley faces a maximum penalty of life in prison, reflecting the seriousness with which the law treats racketeering. The RICO charge alone signals that Henley's influence was not limited to the streets, but extended to a broader criminal ecosystem. One of the most serious allegations in the indictment against Eugene "Big U" Henley is his involvement in the murder of aspiring rapper Rayshawn Williams. Federal prosecutors claim that this killing was not random, calculated act of retaliation, orchestrated to silence and intimidate those who crossed Henley and his organization. This murder is a key component of the racketeering charges, as it allegedly reinforced Henley's control over his criminal enterprise. According to the indictment, the murder of Rayshawn Williams took place in 2021 after the young rapper allegedly recorded a song containing lyrics that Henley found disrespectful. Williams was signed to Unique Music, Henley's record label, which prosecutors claim was not used just for music, but also for laundering money and maintaining influence in the streets. When Henley learned of the song, authorities alleged that he saw it as an act of defiance, one that couldn't go unpunished. Using his connections, Henley reportedly arranged for Williams to travel to Las Vegas under the pretense of a recording session, a setup designed to lure him away from his usual environment. Once in Las Vegas, Williams was allegedly taken to a remote area off Interstate 15, where he was executed. His body was discovered days later, riddled with bullets and dumped in the desert. Law enforcement sources claimed that this was a message killing, not just revenge for the perceived disrespect, but a warning to others who might challenge Henley's authority. The indictment also states that after the murder, members of Henley's organization actively worked to cover up their tracks, destroying potential evidence and intimidating witnesses who might have spoken to the authorities. This murder charge significantly increases Henley's legal exposure. Under federal law, murder connected to racketeering or conspiracy can carry the death penalty or a mandatory life sentence. Prosecutors will likely use the forensic evidence, witness testimony, and digital records, such as phone calls or location tracking, to tie Henley to the crime. Additionally, if any of his co-defendants cooperate with law enforcement, it could strengthen the case against him. The Williams murder is a critical piece of the puzzle in proving that Henley's organization was willing to use lethal force to maintain control, reinforcing the RICO charge with a direct act of violence. Eugene "Big U" Henley played a pivotal role in the early career of the late rapper Nipsey Hussle, serving as his manager and mentor. Their relationship was rooted in their shared history with the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, and a mutual vision to uplift their community through music and entrepreneurship. Together they aimed to transform the narrative surrounding South Los Angeles, promoting economic empowerment and resilience. Henley and Hussle's collaboration extended beyond music. They were deeply involved in community initiatives aimed at reducing gang violence and fostering economic development in South Los Angeles. Their partnership symbolized a bridge between the streets and legitimate business, with Hussle often crediting Henley for his guidance and support. Despite past differences, they reconciled and worked together on various projects, reflecting a complex but impactful relationship. It's important to note that Henley has not been implicated in any wrongdoing related to Nipsey Hussle's tragic death in 2019. Hussle's murder was investigated separately, leading to the conviction of Eric Holder Jr., who was sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. Henley publicly mourned Hussle's passing, emphasizing their shared commitment to community upliftment and the profound loss felt by many. The indictment against Henley focuses on other alleged criminal activities, including the murder of aspiring rapper Rayshawn Williams, but does not connect him to Hustle's death. This distinction is crucial in understanding the scope of the charges and the separate nature of these events. Beyond the violence and fraud, one of the most significant allegations in the indictment is Eugene Big U Henley's role in a widespread extortion racket. Federal prosecutors claim that Henley controlled a check-in system in Los Angeles, forcing celebrities, athletes, and high-profile figures to pay for protection or risk facing serious consequences. This charge highlights the deep-rooted connection between gang culture and the entertainment industry in Los Angeles. The check-in system was allegedly enforced through intimidation, threats, and sometimes physical violence. According to the indictment, Henley and his associates operated this scheme by approaching high-profile individuals visiting Los Angeles, particularly musicians, professional athletes, and industry executives. These individuals were given an ultimatum: either pay Henley and his group for protection while in the city, or risk being targeted by gangs affiliated with the Rolling 60s. The indictment states that those who refused to comply often became victims of robberies, assaults, or harassment, reinforcing the necessity of Henley's protection services. Federal investigators claim that this extortion operation brought in millions of dollars over the years. The payments varied depending on the wealth and status of the individual, with some being forced to pay tens of thousands per visit. It wasn't just about money. Henley allegedly used these check-in protocols to exert power over the music industry and maintain a level of fear and control. High-profile rappers who had gang affiliations or portrayed gang culture in their lyrics were especially vulnerable. In some cases, even major record labels were reportedly pressured into making payments or aligning with Henley to ensure their artists' safety when performing in Los Angeles. The extortion charge is critical in the RICO case because it demonstrates how Henley allegedly ran his criminal enterprise as a mafia-style operation. By leveraging his ties to the streets and the music industry, he created a tax-like system that forced outsiders to pay tribute if they wanted to operate without fear. Authorities believe the system was a key revenue source for Henley's organization and reinforced the power structure that allowed other crimes such as drug trafficking, fraud, and even murder to continue unchecked. If convicted, Henley could face decades in federal prison for his role in organizing and profiting from these illegal protection schemes. In addition to violent crimes and extortion, federal prosecutors have charged Eugene Big U Henley with large-scale financial fraud and embezzlement. The indictment alleges that Henley used his non-profit organization, Developing Options, as a front to steal money intended for community programs. What appeared to be an effort to help at-risk youth was, according to authorities, nothing more than a scheme to funnel money into his own pockets. At the center of this charge is Developing Options, a non-profit Henley founded with the stated mission of providing resources and mentorship for young people in Los Angeles to steer them away from the gang life. The organization received donations from high-profile individuals, corporations, and government grants aimed at supporting anti-gang initiatives. NBA stars such as Draymond Green and Shaquille O'Neal were amongst those who contributed to the non-profit, believing they were supporting a legitimate cause. However, prosecutors claim that much of the money donated to Developing Options never made it to community programs. Instead, Henley is accused of siphoning the funds for personal use, business ventures, and funding illicit activities. Financial records obtained by investigators reportedly show that large sums were withdrawn from Developing Options accounts under vague or falsified expense reports. Some funds were allegedly transferred to shell companies that had no legitimate business activity, while others were spent on luxury items, high-end real estate, and entertainment expenses. Authorities also claim that Henley used the non-profit as a means to launder money from his illegal activities, disguising criminal profits as charitable donations. This type of financial manipulation is a common strategy in organized crime, allowing illicit funds to appear legitimate on paper while keeping law enforcement at bay. The fraudulent activities tied to Developing Options form a major component of the RICO charges against Henley, as they show a clear pattern of using both legitimate and illegitimate means to maintain power and financial control. If convicted of fraud and embezzlement, Henley could face up to 20 years in federal prison per count, in addition to any penalties tied to the overarching racketeering charges. The case against Henley not only exposes financial crimes within criminal enterprises, but also highlights how individuals can exploit community activism for personal gain, betraying the trust of those who genuinely want to help. Among the most disturbing charges in the indictment against Eugene "Big U" Henley is human trafficking, something we've heard a lot of recently. Prosecutors allege that Henley and his associates engaged in the coercion and exploitation of individuals for both labour and sexual services. This charge paints a dark picture of how the alleged criminal enterprise extended beyond financial fraud and violence into the systematic abuse of vulnerable individuals. The indictment claims that Henley and his network were involved in forcing individuals into sex work and labour through intimidation, debt bondage, and physical threats. According to investigators, victims were often lured in under false pretenses, believing they were being offered legitimate employment opportunities or protection. However, once under Henley's control, they were allegedly subjected to coercion, physical violence, and psychological manipulation to prevent them from leaving. Law enforcement sources suggest that some of these individuals were trafficked across state lines, making the case a federal offence with severe penalties. Authorities believe that the trafficking operation was not only a source of profit for Henley's organisation, but also a method of maintaining control over associates and rivals. Some victims were allegedly used as leverage, forced to engage in illicit activities on behalf of the group under threat of harm to themselves or their families. In some cases, trafficked individuals were reportedly forced to transport drugs or launder money, further entangling them in Henley's criminal enterprise. Witnesses and cooperating informants have described a structured operation where women and young men were exploited for financial gain and gang-related activities. Human trafficking is one of the most severely punished crimes under federal law, carrying potential life sentences for those convicted. If prosecutors can prove that Henley and his associates facilitated, funded, or participated in the trafficking of individuals for exploitation, the consequences will be extreme. This charge adds a new level of gravity to the case against Henley, as it shows not just financial and violent crimes, but deeply inhumane and exploitative practices. Federal authorities have made it clear that human trafficking cases will be aggressively prosecuted, especially when linked to organized crime. If that wasn't enough, in addition to violent crimes, fraud, and human trafficking, federal prosecutors allege that Eugene "Big U" Henley operated illegal gambling enterprises, using underground networks to generate large amounts of cash. These gambling operations were not just about making money, they also served as a hub for money laundering and criminal networking, strengthening Henley's grip on organized crime in LA. According to the indictment, Henley's organization ran illegal gambling dens that operated in secret locations throughout LA and beyond. These operations reportedly involved high-stakes card games, sports betting rings, and unlicensed casino-style activities. Many of these gambling operations catered to wealthy clients, gang affiliates, and music industry insiders who were drawn to the exclusive, unregulated nature of these high-stakes games. Law enforcement sources claim that these locations were protected by armed guards and often operated under the assumption that law enforcement could be bribed to look the other way. Illegal gambling served multiple purposes for Henley's criminal enterprise. First, it was a steady stream of untaxed income, with large amounts of cash being moved through these underground casinos. Second, it provided a cover for laundering money from other illicit activities, such as drug sales, fraud, and extortion. Authorities believe that Henley used these gambling operations to turn dirty money into legitimate-looking cash, making it easier to funnel through his businesses without raising red flags. These establishments were also used as meeting points for criminals, where deals, partnerships, and violent orders could be discussed in a secure environment. The illegal gambling charge carries significant weight under federal law, particularly when tied to organized crime and money laundering. In recent years, law enforcement agencies have been cracking down on underground gambling rings that have ties to drug trafficking, loan sharking, and violent enforcement tactics. If convicted, Henley could face up to 10 years in federal prison per count, along with the massive financial penalties and asset forfeiture. Investigators are likely using wiretaps, financial records, and testimony from former associates to prove that these gambling operations were a crucial part of Henley's broader criminal network. One of the more audacious charges in the indictment against Eugene "Big Henley is his alleged involvement in COVID-19 relief fraud. Prosecutors claim that during the pandemic, Henley took advantage of federal relief programs designed to help struggling businesses, fraudulently securing loans that were then funneled into his criminal enterprise. This charge highlights how deeply financial deception was embedded within his operations. According to federal investigators, Henley and his associates falsified financial documents and submitted fraudulent applications to obtain COVID-19 relief loans through the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, known as the EIDL program. These programs were intended to help small businesses stay afloat during the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. However, authorities claim that Henley's company, Unique Music, which he listed as his primary business, was not financially eligible for these loans. In reality, the company had not been profitable for years, and the funds were not used to support employees or business operations. Instead, they were allegedly diverted into personal accounts and used for illegal activities. Financial records obtained by law enforcement reportedly show that Henley used the fraudulently obtained relief funds to make large cash withdrawals, purchase luxury items, and fund parts of his criminal enterprise. Some of the money was allegedly funneled into Developing Options, his non-profit, which was already under investigation for embezzlement. Prosecutors argue that the COVID-19 relief funds provided a fresh influx of cash that allowed Henley to continue funding extortion, drug trafficking, and gambling operations while maintaining the illusion of running a legitimate business. COVID-19 relief fraud has been a major focus for federal prosecutors, with harsh penalties for those found guilty of exploiting pandemic assistance programs. If convicted, Henley faces up to 30 years in federal prison per count, as well as massive fines and restitution payments to the government. Investigators have likely gathered financial statements, wire transfers, and digital communication records to prove that Henley knowingly submitted false applications with the intent to defraud the federal government. The inclusion of this charge further demonstrates how Henley's criminal network allegedly extended beyond violence and extortion into white-collar crime, showing his willingness to exploit any opportunity for financial gain. And the list continued. In addition to financial fraud and violent crime, federal prosecutors have charged Eugene "Big Henley with drug trafficking and illegal firearms offenses. These charges point to the core of his alleged criminal enterprise, revealing how drugs and weapons played a key role in maintaining control, generating income, and enforcing power within the organization. Authorities allege that Henley's organization was heavily involved in the distribution of narcotics, including cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl. Prosecutors claim that the group trafficked large quantities of drugs both within LA and across state lines, using a network of gang members and intermediaries to move and sell illicit substances. The indictment suggests that drug sales were a primary source of revenue for Henley's criminal operation, allowing him to finance other illegal activities, such as extortion and human trafficking. Law enforcement sources indicate that wiretaps and undercover investigations have provided evidence linking Henley's enterprise to multiple high-level drug transactions. In addition to drug trafficking, Henley is also facing firearms-related charges, which include possession of illegal weapons, trafficking in firearms, and supplying firearms to felons. Federal investigators claim that Henley's group maintained a cache of illegal firearms, including fully automatic rifles, unregistered handguns, and ghost guns, which are firearms with no serial numbers, making them untraceable. These weapons are allegedly used to enforce gang activities, protect drug shipments, and carry out violent acts linked to Henley's criminal enterprise. Prosecutors believe that Henley's influence extended to arms deals, where weapons were exchanged for drugs or money, further fueling gang-related violence. Drug trafficking and firearm offences carry severe federal penalties, with convictions leading to mandatory minimum sentences of 10 to 20 years, depending on the quantity of drugs and the types of weapons involved. If the prosecution can prove that Henley's organization was responsible for large-scale narcotics distribution while being armed, the charges could result in life imprisonment without parole. Additionally, federal sentencing enhancements for firearms-related offences, especially when linked to violent crime and organized crime activity, mean that Henley's chances of receiving a reduced sentence are slim. The drug and firearms charges solidify the government's case that Henley's enterprise was not just about fraud and intimidation, but also about directly fueling crime and violence in LA and beyond. As federal investigators closed in on Eugene Henley and his associates, prosecutors alleged that he took deliberate steps to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and obstruct the course of justice. This charge is critical in showing not only the lengths Henley allegedly went to in order to protect his criminal enterprise, but also his influence in preventing law enforcement from uncovering the full scope of his operations. The obstruction of justice charge stems from multiple instances in which Henley allegedly ordered evidence to be destroyed, witnesses to be threatened, and law enforcement investigations to be derailed. One key allegation in the indictment is that after the 2021 murder of Rayshon Williams, Henley directed members of his organization to erase surveillance footage, dispose of potential evidence, and ensure that no one spoke to the authorities. Investigators claim that phone records, intercepted messages, and testimony from cooperating witnesses indicate that Henley actively instructed his associates to mislead investigators and prevent them from gathering critical information related to the case. Beyond the Williams case, prosecutors claim that Henley's pattern of obstruction extended to other aspects of his criminal operations. Law enforcement sources allege that Henley used intimidation tactics to silence informants, often sending gang affiliates to threaten, harass, or even physically assault those suspected of cooperating with authorities. In some cases, witnesses who were set to testify against members of his organization suddenly recanted their statements or disappeared, raising suspicions that Henley's network played a role in suppressing testimony. Federal investigators have also linked him to bribery attempts, where law enforcement officers and court officials were allegedly offered money in exchange for leaking case details or dismissing charges. Obstruction of justice is a serious federal crime, carrying a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison per count, depending on the severity of the interference. In cases linked to organized crime and racketeering, obstruction charges are often used to demonstrate a deliberate and sustained effort to undermine the legal system. If convicted, this charge will further strengthen the RICO case against Henley, as it demonstrates that his criminal enterprise was not just involved in committing crimes, but also in actively working to evade prosecution and accountability. Prosecutors will likely rely on communication records, cooperating witnesses, and surveillance evidence to prove that Henley took calculated steps to interfere with justice, adding another layer of legal jeopardy to an already overwhelming case. These allegations paint a portrait of a deeply entrenched criminal enterprise, masked by a veneer of legitimacy within the music industry and community activism. As the legal proceedings unfold, the extent of these alleged crimes will come to light, shedding further insight into the operations of the Big U enterprise. Bricc, an LA rapper and host on the popular podcast platform No Jumper, was among those arrested during the recent federal operation known as Operation Drawdown. This extensive crackdown targeted the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, a prominent street gang from South LA. Authorities allege that Bricc, alongside other members, was involved in various criminal activities under the gang's umbrella. Founded by Adam22, is a well-known podcast and media platform that delves into hip-hop culture, interviews with artists, and holds discussions on urban trends. Bricc association with No Jumper provides him a platform to reach a broader audience, blending his music career with media presence. Following the arrests, Adam22 addressed the situation, expressing support for his colleagues while distancing the platform from any alleged illegal activities. He emphasized that No Jumper offers opportunities for individuals from diverse backgrounds to engage in legitimate work, stating, "I do employ people from the streets, and yes, people from the streets sometimes get caught up in RICO and whatever the..." In addition to Bricc, several other individuals apprehended as part of Operation Drawdown, notably Loose Cannon, another rapper associated with the Rolling 60s, was arrested during the operation. Authorities also detained Sylvester Robinson, known as Vay, and Mark Martin, whose alias is Bearclaw, both alleged members of the criminal enterprise. In total, the operation led to the arrest of 10 individuals, with 4 already in custody and 5 more suspects currently being sought by law enforcement. These arrests underscore the extensive reach of the investigation and the federal commitment to dismantling organized crime networks operating under the guise of legitimate enterprises. The involvement of public figures like Bricc and Loose Cannon highlights the complex interplay between entertainment industries and street affiliations, prompting discussions about the influence of gang culture within mainstream media platforms. Prior to their arrests, Bricc and Loose Cannon participated in an episode of The No Jumper Show, a podcast renowned for its in-depth discussions on hip-hop culture. In this episode, they delved into various topics, including their personal experiences in the music industry, challenges faced growing up in South LA, and their perspectives on the evolving dynamics of street culture. The conversation offered listeners a candid glimpse into their lives, highlighting both their artistic endeavors and the socio-economic hurdles they've encountered. Unbeknownst to the audience at the time, this episode would be the last appearance before the federal operation known as Operation Drawdown led to their arrests. The subsequent developments cast a shadow over the discussions from the podcast, prompting reflections on the complexities of street affiliations and their implications within the entertainment industry. This turn of events also sparked conversations about the potential consequences of public figures sharing unfiltered experiences, especially when intertwined with ongoing investigations. With the indictment finalized, federal authorities launched a coordinated operation to bring down Eugene Henley and his associates. Operation Drawdown was executed with precision, leading to multiple arrests, major asset seizures, and one of the biggest takedowns of an alleged organized crime network in recent LA history. On March 19, 2025, law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, ATF, DEA, and LAPD, launched a series of pre-dawn raids across LA, targeting Henley's residence, his businesses, and other locations tied to his criminal enterprise. Henley was taken into custody at his luxury home in Beverly Hills, where authorities executed a federal warrant for his arrest. Simultaneously, 10 other individuals connected to his organization were also arrested, including alleged high-ranking members of the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips and associates who handled financial operations, security, and enforcement. The arrests were carried out with SWAT teams, armored vehicles, and federal agents, ensuring that no one had the opportunity to escape or destroy evidence. During the raids, authorities seized millions of dollars in assets, including luxury cars, jewelry, bank accounts, and firearms. Reports indicate that investigators also confiscated stacks of cash, cryptocurrency wallets, and business records, which could serve as crucial evidence in the case against Henley. Several illegal firearms were recovered, including unregistered handguns, high-powered rifles, and modified weapons suspected to be used in criminal activities. In addition, authorities found documents and electronic devices that are now being analyzed for further links to organized crime and financial fraud. Prosecutors have hinted that these seizures may lead to additional charges against Henley and his co-defendants as more evidence is uncovered. Following his arrest, Henley was booked into federal custody and denied bail, with prosecutors arguing that he posed a significant flight risk and a danger to witnesses. During his initial court appearance, Henley pleaded not guilty to all charges, but federal prosecutors have made it clear that they have a mountain of evidence, including cooperating witnesses, financial records, intercepted communications, and forensic analysis of digital devices. The case has already drawn massive public attention, with many in the music and entertainment industry watching closely to see how the legal proceedings unfold. If convicted, Henley faces life in federal prison, with mandatory minimum sentences for several of the most serious charges. The arrest of Henley marks the beginning of a high-profile trial that could expose the full extent of criminal operations tied to the music industry, gang culture, and financial fraud. But the real question remains: will Henley's organization crumble, or are there deeper layers yet to be uncovered? With Henley now in federal custody, the prosecution is preparing what could be one of the most significant organized crime cases in recent LA history. But what exactly do they have on Henley, and how strong is their case? Federal prosecutors have built their case on a combination of witness testimony, financial records, surveillance footage, digital communications, and forensic analysis. According to the indictment, investigators spent years wiretapping Henley's associates, monitoring his business transactions and tracking suspicious financial movements. Law enforcement sources claim they have audio recordings of Henley discussing extortion payments, drug transactions, and directives given to associates regarding acts of violence. Additionally, bank records and shell company transactions reportedly show a clear pattern of money laundering and fraud, with large sums being funneled through developing options, unique music, and other front organizations. One of the prosecution's strongest weapons is expected to be cooperating witnesses, former gang members, business partners, and insiders who have agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Law enforcement sources indicate that at least 2 high-ranking members of Henley's organization have turned informant and are prepared to testify that Henley directly ordered violent acts, controlled the extortion operations, and misused non-profit funds. Additionally, victims of the human trafficking and extortion schemes are expected to take the stand, detailing how they were coerced, threatened, or manipulated into compliance. The prosecution will also rely on expert testimony from financial analysts, forensic accountants, and gang crime specialists to explain how Henley's criminal enterprise functioned. Henley's legal team is expected to argue that the prosecution's case is built on circumstantial evidence and unreliable witnesses. They will likely attempt to discredit the cooperating informants by claiming that they are only testifying to reduce their own sentences. Additionally, Henley's lawyers may argue that developing options was a legitimate non-profit and that any financial irregularities were mismanagement, not fraud. They will also attempt to cast doubt on whether Henley was directly involved in violent crimes or whether his name was simply being used by others within the organization. However, given the scope of the charges and the mountain of federal evidence, many legal analysts believe Henley's chances of avoiding conviction are very slim. As the trial date approaches, the legal battle is shaping up to be a landmark case in federal crime prosecution. But what will potential outcomes look like? As Big U faces trial, the stakes couldn't be higher. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in federal prison. But what are the possible outcomes of this case? If convicted on all counts, Henley faces multiple life sentences in federal prison. The RICO Act charge alone could result in a 20-year minimum sentence, but when combined with additional charges, including murder, human trafficking, and drug trafficking, the penalties escalate significantly. The murder charge in particular is a capital offence, meaning that under federal law, Henley could be eligible for the death penalty if prosecutors choose to pursue it. While the government has not announced whether it will seek the death penalty, life in prison without parole is almost certain if he is found guilty on the murder, trafficking, and RICO charges. Given the overwhelming evidence against him, some legal analysts speculate that Henley may attempt to negotiate a plea deal to avoid a full trial. However, given the severity of the charges, federal prosecutors are unlikely to offer anything less than a multi-decade sentence in a maximum security prison. Even if Henley were to cooperate with law enforcement and provide information on other high-profile figures, the nature of his alleged crimes means that a reduced sentence is unlikely. If he is convicted on only some of the charges, such as fraud and extortion but not murder, he could still face 40 to 50 years behind bars. Operation Drawdown isn't just about one man, it's about dismantling an entire criminal enterprise and sending a message to organized crime figures across the country. But what does this case mean for the future of law enforcement, the music industry, and the streets of LA? This case will likely send shockwaves through the hip-hop industry, where connections between rap, gang culture, and criminal enterprises have long been debated. Henley was a major figure in the LA rap scene, with ties to influential artists and executives. His downfall raises questions about how deeply embedded gang influence is within the industry, and whether record labels, promoters, and streaming platforms will face greater scrutiny for their associations with alleged criminal figures. The arrest of Eugene Big U Henley and the dismantling of his alleged criminal enterprise mark a major moment in the fight against organized crime. But this case is far from over. As the trial unfolds, new evidence, testimonies, and potential plea deals could change the entire trajectory of what we know so far. We'll be following every development closely, bringing you updates as new details emerge. Will Henley beat the charges, Will more names be implicated? And what will this case mean for the future of gang enforcement and the music industry? Make sure you're subscribed to the Silent Casebook so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll be covering the latest updates on this case and more untold stories from behind the headlines. Drop a comment below. Let us know what you think about Operation Drawdown. Is this the beginning of a major shift in law enforcement, or just another high-profile takedown? Let us know your thoughts.